All right, let's go ahead and jump in. We've got a full agenda today. Welcome everyone to the NEMSIS V3 implementation call. This morning is July 22nd. This meeting is being recorded. We post these for your review on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So those are available to you to review back on. Please mute your phone when you're not getting ready to speak. Please feel free to use the chat feature. And this is a conversation. We do welcome your input, suggestions, comments. That is really helpful to us, and we really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and pull down to the agenda. There we go. It's a full docket this morning. Let's go ahead and get started with Laurel Baeder. Laurel, do you need the screen or do you just have talk?
I'm just going to talk for a minute.
Okay.
So real quick, we do have some emergency maintenance that's going on today. It's going to start around 11 a.m. Mountain Time and will continue until about 3 p.m. Mountain Time, give or take a few hours. We are implementing some emergency patches to our servers. It has to be done today. We cannot wait. So that is what's on the menu for today's maintenance. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or send me an email. There will be an email that goes out to the Google group after this meeting that explains more about that maintenance and when it is happening. But again, that will be from 11 a.m. Mountain Time until about 3 p.m. Mountain Time today. All of the NEMSIS services will be intermittently offline for no more than an hour each. Are there any immediate questions about the maintenance today? Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to move on to the August maintenance window. So next month, our maintenance window is August 11th and 12th, and we will be completing some sort of routine server patching, as well as upgrading our Tableau servers. The only expected downtime is for Tableau, which should be down for 2 to 3 hours during those 2 days as we upgrade the server. Is there any questions about the routine August maintenance? Awesome. Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to the next person. If anyone has any questions about maintenance, please feel free to shoot us an email so that we can clarify on any points and let you know what to expect. Thanks.
Thanks, Laurel. Clay, we'll go ahead and have you take it over.
All right, great. Thank you everyone for joining this morning. Very much appreciate it. Let's walk through where we are with the idea of moving our suggested lists for several of the NEMSIS V3 elements to more defined lists. We've had great conversations and progress over the last 3 implementation calls, and we're now, I think, at a resolution. Just in brief, the last decision that we needed to make was how we would be ensuring the use of the defined lists, and we landed on the idea that during compliance testing, there'd be an assessment just of the graphical interface for a number of elements. How that will be actually developed is, what will be kind of objectively looked at is under development now. So let's talk about what's under development. We actually committed to providing 5 additional tools to help you evaluate this suggested list of defined lists. So let's walk through each of those and where we are in those processes. We've completed a lot of this work, and so we want to roll some things out for you to begin to take a more direct look at this work. So the first item was to develop an expert clinical panel to review the current defined lists. Eric at the Office of AMS at NHTSA had some great ideas about how to do that. That's the one piece we haven't initiated yet. We've been concentrating on the other 4, so we will get busy on that clinical review probably next week. Number 2 was to provide an inventory of the codes that did not qualify for inclusion in the defined lists. We have prepared those lists in a larger spreadsheet that is now available for review. and we will roll those out to the Google groups and to the DMC listserv right after this call. Julianne, do you want to take a minute and walk through one of those worksheets just to familiarize the people on the call with how those will be structured?
Sure. We'll just give you an introduction on this one, and each of the worksheets will be similar in formatting. So this one is just for primary and secondary impression. I apologize. The first page is going to be the 2019 recommendation. This is the recommendation that's been on the website for some time under resources, but included in this now you'll see that the frequency is listed, and then other notes for items that have been rolled up into those specific codes. You'll see count of events, frequency, and then for this one represents a 90.528 percentage inclusion for this suggested list. So this is not new right here. Count of events will be your second tab, and this is just the workbook. This is straight out of the data cube, all of the primary impressions, and then you can see we come down to a spot where we've hit that 90% target, and then you've got other codes underneath those that may or may not be included in the suggested list recommendation in that first tab. So some of them you'll see that they're very specific. Those may easily roll up into more generalized codes. But here are the ones with specific codes that aren't necessarily in the suggested list. So where there was some interest in seeing what was not included, you'll be able to review that here. Also, just another breakdown on the top 90%, data dictionary. So just for reference on what that element, what the description of that element is. And then also the 2016 list with what the 2016 list was able to capture as well. So you'll be able to compare the two and the progress between those two. So each of the workbooks will have similar formatting. You'll be able to look at each of these things. If there are questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions. And then of course, if you've got input, suggestions, comments, we're happy to receive all of those as well.
Okay, can you go back to the workbook real quick, please?
Sure.
So on the tab of not included codes, so that threshold there. So of the ones that were not included, can you say which ones are able to roll up?
Can I say which? Well, so on these, so let's use unspecified injury of abdomen. So we've got 25,000 events of unspecified injury of abdomen with the S3991. So in the recommendation, primary and secondary impression, we've got injury. So let's see, abdomen, where we'd find the right spot for abdomen to roll up, but it wouldn't necessarily be on this list. So our target was a 90% threshold. What's that?
Right. So what I'm getting at there is it's really hard to see that, okay, this code was not included because it rolled up into a different code. And I think that's probably really important for the people reviewing it.
I can make a connection of, I think, what David's trying to say, and I saw one myself. If you could, Julianne, if you could go back to that count of incidents and scroll down just a little bit to right where the line breaks.
Oh, let's go back up.
There was one I saw here. So actually right here. So this K92.1 melena, which is black tarry stool from blood in the GI tract. I see when you did go back to the recommendations list, there was another value for a scroll up. Yeah, blood blood and vomit or stool GI bleed. So I guess I think probably what David's trying to say is there easy way to cross-reference the ones that are below this threshold that do have a roll-up that's known, other than kind of going between the tabs?
We haven't specified where every single one of these would fall into a different category, other than just rolling up into the logical parent code for those. Unless there was a specific, so like diarrhea, unspecified, that falls under that 90% threshold, but is covered under functional diarrhea.
Yeah, David and Ben, so I understand the question. A little bit of the roll up in the opposite direction is found in column G, right, where we indicate that it includes other codes. But did we didn't, just because it's a little bit subjective, right, as to does injury to elbow roll up to injury to arm? That's a pretty straightforward one.
Okay.
Some of
yeah. So what we discussed last week, Clay, was doing that cross reference to try to help us understand, because we have for reasons for including codes. Volume is a very good reason to include a code. It's not the only one, and I want to really stress that
yeah, got it,
just
David,
because it's not 90% doesn't mean it shouldn't be included. And having that correlation to say, okay, this diarrhea goes to this diarrhea, so it is covered. That'll get you beyond that 90%, which is good. But help us see that these other codes that do not have a roll-up, and there were 25,000 of them reported, that's a lot. So I really want to stress that the single-minded pursuit of just the volume of the codes is a disservice.
I understand, David. I appreciate that opinion very, very much. If you want us to go through all that scree and indicate how we rolled it up, it's a bit subjective. That's an approach we can take, and if the consensus is for us to do that, we'd be happy to do that. The other way, of course, to do that is to just take a look at the scree, and if you see that there are values there that you feel are not represented in the 2019 recommendations, then we can discuss adding them. So probably the question from here is, I understand, David. So the question here, I think, is really how do you want us to proceed with the identification of adding additional codes, right? So we're going to have a clinical review group look at this. We can take time to show kind of we thought we would roll it up and what wouldn't get rolled up. That sounds like that would be valuable.
So even for that group, for them to see that shock, or I lost track of where the line is, but to say the values below the line, these 80% of them have a roll-up code, because it's not subjective, right? You're developing that algorithm, correct?
Right. The roll-up is a little bit subjective, right? It's not an analytical roll-up, right? So ICD-10 codes have an analytical roll-up, kind of, where you can roll up stem codes to parent codes, but things can cross groups, right? So a good example is even COVID-19 right now. There's a U code, there's a T code that completely crosses boundaries. So this is a little bit subjective, where an H code may actually, we think it could be represented by a T code, right? So that's the kind of subjective piece of this. And so we can subjectively indicate where we think these are represented in the recommendations. And if that will help the clinical review, we're happy to take the time to do that.
I think it very much would be, but I'm a little confused. You're going to publish a roll-up.
The roll-up will be analytical, though, David. It won't. It won't represent these roll-ups.
Hey, Clay, it's Mark Roberts. Can I ask a quick question? Were these lists pulled strictly from 911 responses, or were these pulled from the entire set of everything reported, including critical care, CCT, IFTs, you name it? I'm coming in a little late to this. I just was wanting to know.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's all NEMSIS received EMS activations in 2017 through most of 2018.
So if you were to look at these and look at only the 911 calls only for right now, understanding there's everything else, you might get a different set of lists. Remember, in the field, the crews don't diagnose. They want a quick, dirty list that they can grab and move on, where critical care or IFTs, they're being more specific based upon a hospital face sheet or some additional time that's being spent with the patient. So some of these things you're getting right now, I mean, our crews would just not even want to talk about it because they're just too specific. Obviously, we have to have them for air. We have to have them for critical care. But is it really two lists that we should focus on? The one that's just for the 911, which is what we're all, I don't even know how to say this, which is a large portion of our business, and then have a secondary list which encompasses everybody else. It might be easier to break it in that way. I don't know, or look at it that way at least.
Yeah, Mark, it's a good question. Hey, Julianne, can you bring up that little Excel spreadsheet that you sent to me this morning that just shows the number of codes that are represented in the old versus the new? So Mark, your comment is correct. If we were probably just to limit it to 911 ground activations, we could have less codes. We have less codes now, and again, I think we're going through this exercise because people are fearful that we need to add codes. So we could do that.
Our vendors give us the ability at the local level to be able to add codes and then roll them up to whatever the suggested list is. And I have this fear that no matter what list you come up with and how much time you spend on it, there's still going to be those that want to add more codes. They're going to round them up, that you'll never know what was actually collected in the field. You'll only see what they actually rolled it up to and reported to you. So the granularity is going to be at the user level and the vendor level. And what you're going to see is just, what do you want to see? And we have to make it fit in that bucket.
Yeah. Yep. So you're absolutely correct. I think what we're trying to do here, if you just look at row 2, is maybe setting the baseline right for cause of injury, and instead of having 2,100 causes of injury, we're setting the bar at 82. But you're right, states will potentially add some, and agencies will potentially add some, but I'm very hopeful that we won't end up with 2,000 codes that need to be rolled up. Just for the value of our providers to not have to deal with 2,000 codes. So, yeah, I think what we've landed on here is not to mandate these codes, but to ensure that these baseline codes are presented, and then we hope, as we educate states and educate providers, that they be conservative in adding additional codes. They'll all analytically roll up, and you'll have the initial code and you'll have the roll up as Josh is defining. But yeah, you're right. I doubt all states will utilize 82 codes for cause of injury.
Clay, this is Ben at ImageTrend. I put in a comment in the chat a bit ago, and I think Julianne responded here, but it'll be really beneficial for us to review these lists, in talking about that scree. I mean, sure, the panel, in talking about having a panel in place, I think there's a lot of merit to that, and certainly beneficial, but you guys evaluating the scree is probably not going to be as productive as us evaluating it with feedback from our clients, just because they're the ones who are going to have the most opinions about losing a value, not losing a value, et cetera.
Yeah, that sounds good. I agree, Ben. So maybe what we'll do is go ahead and release these and let me know if there's a consensus on this, if this might work, is for us to go ahead and release these. We can work on identifying how they might roll up, but it also could be incredibly valuable for just human eyes, other than ours, to take a look at these and identify what in the scree really is not well represented in the recommendations. I'd like to have this all be just really cleanly done, but I think if you guys could do an initial look, and then I think the idea is to update this list on a regular basis, probably an annual or biannual that we talked about, and we need to develop a process whereby we can come up with a consensus about how to add code. So we'll still be doing that work and getting that ready.
This is Josh Legler. I'll underscore Ben's comment. I took a look at the cause of injury list a couple weeks ago, spent maybe an hour kind of looking through it, and I found several areas where I personally thought there could be improvement in the list to improve coverage, or in some cases, pick a slightly different ICD-10 code to be more technically accurate. And so I really think it would be important for as many people as possible to look through these lists and give them some good scrutiny. They've been out for years, but I think in the past they haven't received as much scrutiny because it hasn't been a topic of conversation. And now in the past 6 months, it has been. And they're going to carry a little more weight now. And so it's worthwhile to really spend some time going through these lists.
Yeah.
Sure. Ben, this is Eric. Let me ask a question. When you said about having your clients review these, and I'm all for that, who are you saying is going to review them?
Yeah, that is a good question. I should be clear on my end. I don't plan to open this up to the peanut gallery of a couple hundred or 1,000 agencies. Obviously we'll have some clients that will have strong opinions. With the states we have, they obviously kind of have their own, opinions and enforce those. But, we also have a plethora of, providers in the building who, we'll probably want to look through that list ourselves and just say, like I said, it was the first time I'd seen it, but when Julianne had the screen up to show, she showed the line. When I saw Malena, the first thing I thought was, well, wait a minute, just because people didn't pick it because, with enough frequency, it's below the line. Now, then I later saw that there was a roll-up. So I think on our end, it would be beneficial, even just in-house for our clinicians to be able to look at things and say, is there anything below this threshold that, maybe didn't meet the number because enough people didn't pick it, but it has a lot of clinical value versus, no, I feel comfortable not having Malena in the list because I do have an option that we can activate that simply is, GI bleed.
Okay, so I guess my question, and I wanted to hear your answer because I heard Josh's comments, and Josh mentioned in his that about people reviewing it. I forget the word you used, that quickly slipped out of my head. You said states. When I first talked to Clay about this, we talked about having a couple docs look at this, and then I realized that was the wrong approach. I guess to me, the merit in spending all this time looking at these is in having the actual field providers themselves tell us which ones are there, not necessarily which ones there are important and to them. I have heartburn with the detail and specificity in some of these, in knowing that the EMS providers are 9 chances out of 10 going with whatever that roll-up code is going to be. But I don't feel comfortable making that call. So I agree with you that someone else from your services and clients should look at that. My concern is I don't want that to be like state directors. I don't want that to be medical directors only. I don't want it to be like the quality assurance officer who's reviewing it, not necessarily entering it. If I didn't have COVID I would put together a panel of about 8 or 10 sharp BLS and ALS providers in a room somewhere and spend a day or two beating through this. To be quite honest with you, that to me is the merit in doing what we're doing now. I'm more concerned about who's looking at this than the actual doing it. I'm more than favor of doing it. I just want to make sure we get the right people giving us that list. Otherwise, we're back to square one again. Over.
Agree 100%.
I think there's some merits there, and I I agree, and I think, you know, also thinking back to Mark's comment a little while ago, is that, you know, we are going to run into this space. I mean, we in our interface allow folks to activate values and also map them. So I think that would be kind of a change, is trying to increase the amount of mappings, whether they need to be mapped on export to the state, whether the state wants to actually receive more values than this list, and then they would map them out to you, or they're being rolled up on your end. You're just receiving the codes and rolling up. I mean, I think that needs to be flushed out. I agree. There's a lot of merit to getting direct feedback from you know, the field providers. I'd also just say, knowing the politics of working with our clients, you know, there's some medical directors that are very involved in this, you know, the process of what they want their providers to see and pick versus not. So there's certainly a spectrum.
And I don't want to discourage that, but I'll give you the perfect example using PPE right now. I think every medical director would say they want their service personnel documenting they're using PPE during COVID. Yet when I look at that across major vendors and across the, you know, we're looking at maybe 30-35% compliance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's one thing to say yes as the medical director or as the leader of your organization that I want you to do it. It's another to have reasonable expectation that the EMS providers are going to actually do it. And that's where the other thing that, and this is completely political on my part, one of the things I get beat up on the most for this NEMSIS project is not listening to the field providers, not taking into account what the field providers are doing. So this is one case where I feel like, hey, we should reach out to them and ask. And I'm not sure we can talk play afterwards about the timeline on this, but I think I have enough money and I have enough capability to, I'm not saying not do the part that Ben's breaking. Absolutely. Let's do that as the first pass. And then where there's conflict or where there's, you know, disparity, we'll bring in a couple of EMS providers, and by a couple, I mean like a team of people from different levels and from a couple of different parts of the country, maybe urban and rural, and say, hey guys, we're going to beat through this list on the course of an afternoon. And, you know, I'm sorry I can't buy you drinks afterwards, but we're not in person. And give us your perspective. What's your input on this? And it might be interesting just to see what they say. I'm more than willing to go to that level on this because I think it's that important.
This is Josh again. As I looked through the lists, I identified two types of expertise that would be helpful. One is clinical, and that's what you're speaking to, Eric, is the field providers. And the other is someone with ICD-10 coding experience to translate what the providers say is important into the right code from the ICD-10 code set. And I think those two types of expertise should work together. If you have the provider look through an ICD-10 list, they know what they want, but they may end up picking the wrong code for it. So it's important to know what they want, what they need. It's important to have someone with that coding expertise to pick the right code for it.
So Clay, for our way ahead, we agree we put these lists out for everyone to take a look at, let the vendors talk to their people and talk about, you know, look at the list and move forward on that front. And then as a next step, let's talk about planning like a smaller group of people, and we can have like a large audience or whatever as part of that, but have like a key group of participants take another look at them and make sure from the EMS provider's point they look reasonable. And then we'll incorporate Josh's comment for the ICD-10 person to make sure we're on track and not making too many mistakes. Does that sound reasonable? If I'm messing with a timeline that we have to meet, Clay, let me know. But I think it's worth the extra step.
Oh yeah, no, we this is we need to finish this work. So it can't be drawn out for a long period of time, but we can clearly modify current deadlines to be able to work this in, Eric. That's always a possibility. The other thing we mentioned us doing is for the NEMSIS to indicate the roll-ups that we anticipated in the scree, right? So why we felt like there were things below that were represented by other codes, and we can work on that as well. So that's the other kind of immediate request we've had. Are there other immediate kind of requests? I'm kind of going through the chat as well. Hannah Yang mentioned the CDC roll-ups that are available for external cause. We have those and we utilize those. So thank you, Hannah. That's helpful. You may want to involve the states with reaching out to a few agencies. Yeah, I think on the DMC call, and I'm hoping that there was interest in that group too, as well, in reviewing these lists and maybe providing them out, just like you're talking about. That could be incredibly valuable. So we'll talk to Tom and to Jay about that.
I will also include that in our new report that we're doing to DA and the SEMSO for their board meetings.
Yeah. All right, great. Great. Let's see. Is there any other comments about the format? Julianne, can you put back up the format just briefly, the Excel spreadsheet format? Any other questions about the format? Did people feel like the tabs provided them with everything that they needed to look at?
Well, if you can add the roll-up column, that'd be very helpful.
Right. Right. We'll do that, David. We'll indicate the ones that we've. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So before releasing it, you mean?
No, we're going to go ahead and release them. I want people to take a look at this. If you want to wait, David, to wait until we have the what we feel like were the roll-ups associated with much of the screen, then go ahead and just wait and review. But I think there's value, as Josh mentioned, in just spending an hour and identifying and providing to us areas where you just spend a little bit of time where you think there's a better code or.
Okay.
Yeah. So
my only concern is that you get that kind of data and something comes up and it just is like, oh well, we're too far gone, we can't accommodate any requests right now, and I just want to hopefully avoid a situation like that, because you despite discussing this for 6 months, this is the first time we're seeing this. And
well, they've been on the website, David, for a year. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They've been, these renewed lists have been out since 2019. I'm not sure when, Julianne, but probably about this time or a little bit later. Perhaps not a full year yet, these revised ones. But,
okay, but not the roll-ups, correct?
The analytical roll-up is being developed right now by Josh. How we see the scree rolling up? No, that's not indicated in these Excel spreadsheets. But these Excel spreadsheets are on the website now, as they basically are. We've done some cleanup. These were our workbooks that we used to actually review the past lists and review the thousands of codes that were provided in 2017 and 2018. These were the workbooks that we used.
Understood.
Okay.
Clay Keenan had a good point in the chats. For this first round, the roll up, I think having the vendors take a look at it, that's one piece of it. But then as we get, and I'm assuming that instead of this expert panel we talked about earlier, we're talking about this group that we're going to have do this review. That includes some of our billing agencies. We can use the ones we've engaged with for the ET3 process, because we had a pretty diverse representation, or we had large, small, and whatever, and have them take a look at that as well. But, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll do that, Eric. And Keenan, maybe we can talk about this just a little bit, because this is a valuable piece, but we we receive a little bit of conflicting information regarding this in that, so I'm just trying to evaluate the importance of this. We see this comment often, but then we also get comments back that billers don't look at cause of injury. Billers don't look at incident location. Billers don't look at some of these elements that we are working on. They don't evaluate the incident of location to bill.
So Clay, I'm gonna try to keep my soapbox reserved for later. The location isn't really important. Primary, secondary impression, cause of injury, those most certainly are looked at by billing companies. And when we exchange files between systems, and even systems that are built to be integrated systems, that's actually present in the XML that billing companies will receive from an EMS agency. So they are a driving force behind pretty much probably 80–90% of the changes that we find ourselves making and customizing for customers. Most medic organizations, they do want a good concise list, but billing companies want something that they can bill off of.
That sounds great. Julianne, can you bring back up that small Excel spreadsheet? Let's just determine if there are lists that we don't need to have billers evaluate. So incident location, how about procedure and medications? Those are important, symptoms, impressions. And so all others you've mentioned, Keen and Wright would be important for billers.
Correct. I think EC09 is the only thing nobody really cares about, but.
Okay.
This is Josh. I used the phrase ICD-10 coding expertise intentionally. Billers are one group that have ICD-10 coding expertise, and I think they'd be valuable for that expertise. Not specifically for their billing experience, but for the fact that they know how to look through the ICD-10 code set and pick codes. That's the expertise we're looking for. So even if an element's not important for billing, we need some people who know how to look through ICD-10 and pick correct codes that are accurate.
Right. Okay, super. Any other comments about the inventory of codes here? I think we have some good marching orders to clean this work up and have it evaluated. All right, great. Let's just walk through the remaining 3 things that we're doing. We are working right now on a 3-pager that just develops the methodology that we used. The document goes back to the V2 days and just talks about how we have come up with the suggested and then the defined list update that happened in 2019. So that's in draft form and under review. So we'll get that out to this group to review as well. I think that'll be a good document just to have polished and have available for researchers as they look at the differences in the lists over the years, and then also just to help with buy-in into this approach. I think it'll be valuable. On item number D, we talked about scheduling some demonstrations with some software to give us an idea of how they're presenting these code sets for these elements in their graphical interface now, so that we can determine how best to develop the objective measures that we'll use during compliance testing to look at how to ensure the defined lists are utilized. We have the list of software. Laurel has provided us with the lists, and we'll be reaching out to the software vendors this week to make 30-minute Zoom opportunities that if you'd be willing to share your graphical interface with us and just give us a feel for how you're doing it now, and ensuring our approach will accommodate all the creative work that's been done to ensure that codes can efficiently be provided to our clinicians. The PowerPoint presentation is about 90% done. It just kind of people could use to present in regards to this idea of defined lists and how compliance measures will be applied. Those are the only slides that have not yet been included in that, so we're close to done with that. And then wanted to talk a little bit about this last item, number F. I don't think that we've landed on something for sure with this. And it's in regards to the current format of these lists as in Excel spreadsheets that have been on the website since the beginning of version 3. Is there a better format for consumption by vendors? And we talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to have a little bit more discussion in regards to this. And Josh, I know that you took some preliminary notes about the initial ideas. Can you maybe just comment on where you think we left this, and perhaps we can just get consensus that this is the approach to take?
Yeah, I think the request here was to have all of these suggested lists or defined lists in some standardized format. So as you know, with Excel, it's pretty flexible. Someone could add a column or change colors or whatever, stuff that is kind of beyond what's important for the data. So in terms of providing these in some kind of standardized format, you know, a couple options come to mind. One is at a real simple level, we can do CSV, tab, or pipe delimited files. And the other that comes to mind is to have an XML structure for these lists. Personally, I think I'd lean towards that XML structure, but I'd love to get some comments from vendors. You know, what would be a structure that would be easy for you to consume on a somewhat more automated basis than maybe what you're able to do with the Excel spreadsheets today.
Yeah, this is Amanda with ImageChend. I think XML would work fine for us. That's exactly what I was thinking when I made the request.
Okay, thanks, Amanda.
I'll second the XML. Is that EMS charts? Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem with XML. No problem with you know, text file, whatever you got.
Okay.
Okay, great. That sounds like we have a consensus there. I just want to point out we've had comments from Elizabeth regarding billing. Thank you. We appreciate that. The analytical roll-up, of course, would not, we won't consider billing in regards to that roll-up. That so thanks, Elizabeth. You're right, they'll want specific codes. And then James mentioned that there's also another standard for injury. TQIP has a classification matrix. I don't know how different that is from the CDC matrix. I'll take a look at that. I haven't actually looked at that in the past, so I'll take a look at what TQIP has.
Yeah, and then Ridgely asked if there could be CSV available to the rest of us if we use XML as the primary format. The answer to that would be yes. If we start with an XML format, then we can transform it to pretty much anything else we'd like.
Okay, good. Vigorous conversation regarding these lists. Thank you so much. I think we're really honing in on an approach that's going to help not only our providers to be more accurate and be more efficient and have it just be easier to use. I think we're also making great strides for states and for researchers who are trying to translate this data into more meaningful research for our providers, and at the federal level for providing better opportunities for compensation and for reimbursement and for educational purposes, lots of good stuff. So thank you very much for all your hard work on this issue. It's been incredibly valuable. All right, let's move on to the next item. I think I had the next item, so I'll just take that real quickly. We've been requested to add another custom value to our list of national custom elements and values that were associated with the COVID outbreak. Julianne, would you be so kind as to bring up eVitals 25 just so we can kind of talk through this? And in Arizona brought this to our attention. It was a request from a provider in in her state. We've discussed this with the Office of EMS at NHTSA, and they feel like this would be a valuable addition as a custom value. Wanted to talk to you as the vendors about this idea. If you could blow that up just a little bit, it's a little bit small. So the idea here is that in light of COVID, the method by which temperature is being taken is with these new no-touch infrared devices. And the specific request provided by the agency is that's clearly not here. Infrared is not here, or no touch is not here. Is there a, what would they suggest it be rolled up to? And when they looked through these, it was difficult to find one that fit, right? I guess the closest would be temporal artery, perhaps. But those devices that utilize temporal artery to measure temperature are clearly different than an IR device. And so the request is to add a custom value of IR or no touch that would be added to eVitals 25, and that for now, so that's the idea, is to add a custom value. And Julianne, can you, I know I'm putting you on the spot. Could you bring up the document that we've put together that summarizes all the changes that have been associated with the infectious disease outbreak? Yeah, just giving you, yeah, and so those are custom elements that were added. Here's the custom value list so far. We would be adding eVitals 25 here and adding IR, open paren, no touch, or something like that here. First, I just want to get an idea from the vendors. Have you implemented this? Is there language that you've used? Have you had this request? I think we've heard from the Office of EMS and NHTSA that we'll be doing this. We just want to make sure that whatever the value label is that we use is most appropriate. Do folks have some comments?
Can you go back to the value that is proposed?
Yeah, Ben, so here's the list. And so the additional value would what we've been kicking around is infrared, open parens, no touch, closed parens. Any thoughts? It sounds like there's a consensus that folks feel like this is a good thing to do. I'll just ask again, any vendors that have been asked to do this and have used a different label for the value than what I just stated? Infrared, open paren, no touch, closed paren.
I haven't seen a request.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
There.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted someone.
So my question is, what are we gaining by putting this into place? You know, a temperature is a temperature, and as a lot of us are trying to get into the 3.5 work, every time we add one of these custom fields, that's taking our teams away from being able to move to the next version of NEMSIS. And we still haven't answered the question of whether or not these custom elements are going to remain custom elements in the new version, or if they're going to be somehow moved into the fields that they're related to. So I think that that's probably something that we should address before we start introducing more and more custom elements.
Yeah, Peter. So you asked a couple of questions there. Probably the most poignant is whether or not these custom elements and values will become part of NEMSIS with 3.5.1. Is that kind of your question?
That's one of them. That's not necessarily the one that needs to be answered right now. I guess my main question is, since most of us as vendors have not had a request for this, what is this new value? Who is this new value for? And what's it really going to change in terms of what the data is telling us?
Yeah. So let's address it. So this isn't a national element. It's not a state level element. It's a completely optional element. So you're right, Peter. Lots of agencies may not be using this element. So that speaks to its importance or not importance to add. In regards to accuracy, that was the major request by, I think, Tucson Fire, and perhaps Ann's on the call, is they utilize this.
I just put something in the chat, so I think that's a good question. I don't know which vendor it was that asked, why should we, and it is a good question. And someone else said it more eloquently yesterday when we were discussing this on the data managers call. I don't remember who it was, but the way they kind of said it is, one thing that I think has been drilled into me over the years of doing this job is, as much as possible, you don't want to encourage a crew member or an agency to incorrectly document something. I know we sometimes say the closest value, but I don't think infrared thermometers are going away. I don't think it's just for COVID. And when an agency comes to me and kind of says, there's nothing here, I want to document this correctly, I want to train my crews to document correctly, I think we should encourage, be able to provide something to them if possible, even if it's not something that goes nationally. And it's not just from Arizona where apparently this has come in as a request. So it just looks like a piece of equipment that agencies all over the country are using, whether or not they're going to their states and asking for proper methods of documenting it. Just my opinion.
Thank you, Ann.
Given that given that eVitals 25 is optional, I'm curious if other vendors are able to add this and add the actual selection list and not export it. I mean, is the state actually looking at eVitals 25 itself?
Yeah, so Keaton, is your question, how many states mandate eVitals 25?
Functionally, sure.
Yeah. Can you look at that, Julianne? Again, I know I'm really putting you on the spot, but you could go to the NEMSIS website and just go to elements in the state reportings section, and we can determine for eVitals 25 how many states require that element be reported. So go to view reports, state reports, a version 3 dashboards. Okay, and then go down a little bit. Let's go down to the data elements there, the state data elements right there. Okay, let's go down to eVitals 25 and see how many states we have there.
Getting there.
Long list. Yeah, so 15 states.
Is this 15 states require it, or 15 states pass it up to you?
We don't collect it. It's not a national
Okay.
element. We do not collect it. 15 states collect it.
My follow-up question is, if this is to serve as sort of an out for the providers, have we thought about sort of another temperature method not specified, or something like that, being that one of the things that sort of tech is sort of leaning on now with COVID is different methodologies to measure temperature without contacting the patient, and we're going to see probably some decent innovation over the next year or two with technologies there. Do we want to just do IR, or do we want to do just sort of an other category for now?
Yeah, I'll just, that's a great comment, Ken. I mean, I'll just share with you kind of the mantra of NEMSIS. We've tried, we recognize that particularly in procedures and medications, those things could change a lot. And we've tried to steer clear of other, just because it becomes inconclusive and hard to utilize. So just as a general rule, NEMSIS has very few other categories, but if folks feel like this is such moving target, then that would make some sense. I doubt that IR is going to go away. There may be new things that come aboard and we may need to revisit this, but I doubt that infrared measurement is going to disappear. Steve mentions we could just add a no touch as a category, a no touch device, rather than specifying it has to be infrared. Any thoughts on that?
I guess it is the same questions, but I don't particularly mind if you even swapped them to no touch infrared, and then if another no touch comes along, you can use the same code with a different, with more in the parentheses.
Got it. Yeah, David, that's a good idea. Yeah, so just reverse the terms in the description. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any last comments? Thank you. Another really good discussion. Any other comments to share? All right, super. Thank you very much again for your participation on this topic. It's incredibly helpful. We're saving the Zoom chat. We always review it after the call, so please feel free, if you're not speaking up, to type something. We'd love to be able to review it. And Matthew brings up another approach. I'll have to look that up. I don't know what FLIR is, but it may be may speak to what David was talking about. So listing no touch first. So, okay. I think I'm now turning it over to Josh to just provide a quick review of UUID, just to make sure folks are keeping that structure in mind as we move forward, and to see if there's any questions regarding our approach to UUID. So Josh,
Clay, are we skipping e-exam 14 and 23?
Oh, thank you. I apologize. I'm sorry, Julianne. I apologize.
That's okay. We just wanted to, and this one will be quick. We just wanted to bring up this issue that was brought to us, that was brought to our attention. Some of the duplicative meanings between e-exam 13 and e-exam 24, where you have chest assessment findings and you have posterior. And would a clinician use this, or would a clinician use e-exam 13 for the back and assessment finding for a back general, or a thoracic left, or a thoracic right? So this was a really great finding that was pointed out to us, and we've had a growing list of items for consideration for an upcoming standard revision. So no changes at this point, but we just wanted to bring some attention to this. So as you find these things when you are working in 3.5 and implementing 3.5, please send them to us. We're collecting all of them so that when we look to make that next version, we will have all of this good information to adjust and refine just even better for the next one. So just wanted to point this one out. This is a great example. So thank you.
This is Ben at ImageTrend. I will just say anecdotally, and we can provide maybe more succinctly in some examples in writing, but we do get a lot of requests through our process for custom values related to often values people are trying to document in the flank, and having a clear anatomical spot. Part of our process is we do try to guide them to the right field, but I think when we look at the e-exam, elements that are available, there's probably a little space to maybe add one more option that kind of actually encompasses everything.
Would you send that, Ben? And I'd love to have it as part of this issue in our list that's growing. That's sure. Anything that we can do to improve documentation in the field, that will be really important for us to gather.
Yeah, and then we can provide it so that you can actually kind of see how the requests come to us, because the way our clients actually make those is they pick the the NEMSIS element, and then they request a value, they propose what they're looking for and what we should map it back to. So we should be able to actually give you a little context where you can kind of see from their request where they're asking to say, I'm trying to document, this finding of a stab wound on the left flank, and I'd like you to map it here. And then even we can provide some of our comments back to them about how to handle some of their requests.
That would be really helpful. Any other questions or comments on this?
So then I guess I just have a quick question in terms of extracting this data to send up. If they pick left posterior or left thoracic, would we map it to both of those things? Like, would we say that left posterior and left thoracic are the same finding location, I guess? And then we would put whatever finding they have under both of those? Or do we just let them choose? And
Yeah, Peter, this is Claire. I'll respond to that quickly. So this isn't a national element, so it doesn't need to come to the national level. I think we're not asking for really any mapping to be done here. We're just indicating that there is, we see an issue that's been brought to us, and it's a valuable contribution. But actually, how we'll handle this will go through the regular process of having a full vetting of the approach to take, and will probably be associated with a revision to NEMSIS in the future, right? So I think I think we're just trying to point out that right now, if a provider is required to fill out both e-exam 13 and e-exam 24, they're a little bit redundant.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Possibly related, but we've added finding locations to pretty much every other body part that's there. So head, neck, you have your front, top, posterior. We've never brought it up because we figured that's probably way too much of a change at this point in NEMSIS v3. But if you're interested in it, we can provide that.
Yes, absolutely, David.
Okay.
All right. Josh, now you're up. You had a good long warm up there, Josh, to get ready for.
Okay, I better be ready. All right,
for your
let's
section.
see. Let me see if I can share my screen. Give me just a second here. Hey, I was asked to just provide kind of a refresher on UUIDs. And the reason for that is we worked on them over a period of several years, and then NEMSIS 3.5 was finalized last year. And it just hasn't really been discussed much since the standard was finalized, which is fine. But we just want to kind of go over, I guess, some of the high points of UUIDs. I know vendors are in the throes of implementation of 3.5 right now. So this just kind of serves as a reminder. Go back to the UUID guide, which is on the NEMSIS website in the technical resources guides page, and was also sent via email yesterday, I think. So just a couple kind of reminder things on UUIDs. This is from an old presentation, so there's nothing new in here. For NEMSIS 3.5, they are mandatory. The purpose of UUIDs is to identify data objects in agency demographic data, and also to identify or serve as the primary key for a patient care report. And they just serve as technical keys for moving data from local agency systems up to state systems, and allow the state system to be able to track changes, insertions, or deletions of objects over time by the local level systems as they resubmit data. So with that purpose in mind, then UUIDs will be auto-generated by collect data systems, and they will be used by the receive and process systems as keys for making updates, insertions, deletions when they receive data. That UUID should be auto-generated. It should be stored in the collect data system and in the receive and process system when it receives it. And it should not change over time for an object within a system. So in other words, an agency adds a vehicle to their vehicle list. Their collect data system obviously creates a data object to represent the information about that vehicle. And that data object would have a UUID auto-generated and attached to it as a key. And as long as that data object exists, no matter what kind of updates the agency makes to the information about the vehicle, that UUID stays the same for that data object. Someday down the road, the agency sells the vehicle. They delete or inactivate that data object in their software. And at that time, it becomes retired and no longer gets sent on to the state system in a demographics export. UUID should have no business meaning, just be auto-generated, and will be generated according to the RFC 4122 algorithms. There's actually kind of a family of algorithms that can be used there. These are the elements that have UUIDs. The NEMSIS 3.5 data dictionary shows them as well. So almost all of them are in DEM dataset, and they are on things that repeat within an agency. Actually, as I look at this now, we decided not to do it on demographic report. Demographic report itself does not have a UUID. So it's these objects within an agency that can repeat. There can be multiple instances of these things, and thus the need to identify each instance uniquely. And then on the EMS dataset side, patient care report will have a UUID. The national schematron for 3.5 has a rule in it that requires that the same UUID cannot occur more than once within a demographic report. In other words, within an agency. Your software could use the same UUID for the same person who works in two different agencies. That would pass validation because that UUID would show up in two different demographic reports. That would be fine, but you can't have the same UUID within a single demographic report. And for the PCR identifier, remember in pre 3.5, the identifier for a PCR was the combination of state, agency number, and agency unique ID, along with a combination of patient care report number, EMS unit call sign, and unit notified by dispatch date time. Or at least that's how many systems implemented their identification of a PCR. The problem was that if someone corrected the call sign or they corrected the notified time on their PCR and resent it to the state or to national, then the state or national database ended up creating a duplicate of their PCR because the key changed. So to avoid that, we'll have the UUID on a patient care report. The identifier will be this combination. It'll still be the state, the agency ID and number, combined with the UUID of the patient care report. And so any of the content of the report could change and it will still be identified as being the same patient care report over time. So this is just a few reminders of the highlights there of the UUID part of the standard that's new in NEMSIS 3.5, just kind of as a reminder as you're developing your products to go back to that UUID guide for technical guidance. And of course, if you have questions, send those over to the NEMSIS TAC for some assistance. And yeah, that should wrap it up. Any questions that anyone has about UUIDs?
So I feel like half of this meeting was just for me because I have most of these questions.
Okay.
So one of the things that we're running into is the idea of re-identifying data objects after they've been quote unquote retired. So as an example, let's say that you have a crew member who has left your agency, gone somewhere else, you've retired them from your system, deleted them, disabled them, whatever you do in the system. Is it the responsibility of the collect data system to recognize that if they were to return, to recognize that they already have a UUID in the system? And if that is a responsibility, what kind of matching should we be doing that on?
Yeah, that would be nice ideally, but is not strictly required. So
Okay.
the person leaves the agency, that object is probably inactivated in your system, because in reality, we really don't delete these objects. They were attached to previous calls and need to be there for historical purposes. Yeah, they come back to the agency 5 years later. The agency may be using the same software they were using before. They may still have that object in their system. Your software may provide a way for them to reactivate that object and then just go ahead and update the person's info and run with it. I think that would be a great way to go, but yeah, there's nothing in the guidance that strictly requires that. So if the agency went ahead and created a new object because they just hired this person, and maybe the current manager of the agency doesn't even know that that person worked for the agency 5 years ago, then that's going to work too.
Okay, cool. And that was just my question because I didn't see any guidance about it. So that answers that perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, Peter's question kind of addresses this point that we've tried to reiterate with UUIDs, which is that these are used to uniquely identify data objects. Data objects represent real world things, but they're an abstraction. And so we're representing these data objects, we're identifying them over time. While they represent a real world thing, they aren't the real world thing itself. They're just a chunk of data. And this is to facilitate those inserts, updates, and deletions as that data gets resubmitted over time from a collect data system to a receive and process system. All right, thanks everyone. Send it back to you, Julianne.
All right, I think we'll just go straight to the website. Actually, we'll go to flyers. So boot camp, August 25th, we have had terrific signups. And I'm sorry to say a few of you will be getting emails this week thanking you for your interest, but that we are keeping the boot camp to state data managers and state offices of EMS. So there's a few vendors that expressed interest and also some researchers. But the main focus for that boot camp will be state data managers and state officials. We're excited for that. That's coming up. And then annual meeting, this flyer will go out today as well. You'll all have this September 15th through 17th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll have 12 different topics and sessions. The agenda will be prepared ahead of time. So if you know that there's one specific topic that you want to make sure you're prepared to talk about and engage and listen in on those conversations, you'll have that to be able to schedule with. Also, registration for the annual meeting is now live, and that's on Eventbrite. The link will be sent to you with the flyer as well, and you just register on Eventbrite for the annual meeting. This is open to everyone. So we've got some details provided for you. And there is the justification letter invitation that Clay created. I know some states still need to have to submit for justification for their time, even though we are not charging for the annual meeting this year. We understand that in order to justify time commitment, that you may need that letter. So if you're not able to find it, just shoot me an email. We'll send it to you, whatever you need on that. So these will come out to you. These will come out to you today, and we're just really excited that these are coming up fast. They're going to be really good. Any questions for boot camp or annual meeting? Oh, let me check chat.
I'm just noticing it looks like there will be a tiny bit of overlap on Tuesday the 15th with the monthly NEMSIS data managers call.
Yes, there will be.
Yeah, Josh, that's true, and we'll make sure that the items of discussion best reflect that overlap. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only a half hour, so it shouldn't be a huge deal.
Thanks, Josh. Any other questions or comments? Awesome. All right. Eric, I think you're up. There's a few topics that Eric wanted to address with us this morning and have a conversation about. Do you need the screen, Eric, or are you just gonna?
I do not. Just to give you
Okay.
just a real brief overview. The PPE data collection, and it's more than really PPE. It's PPE and COVID-related exposure activity within the agency is going to go out here in the very near future from our office. This is an agency level voluntary process. We talked a little bit about this in the past, and I was asking about how to do this through the vendors, and it was suggested by the vendors and data managers that we do a different approach, and we did. So we're following the hospital and nursing home data collection processes for COVID-related 19. I've said this many times. I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing it. This is not the way I would do it if it was completely up to me. However, we are basically plugging in data to an existing system within HHS, formerly FEMA's process, now HHS's process. Many of you know, if you've been watching papers, the CDC is no longer in that process. However, the data elements are still pretty much the same, with the exception of an additional list of data elements that were added to hospitals and nursing homes as part of required reporting now. So it's been an interesting time for data collection related to COVID at the national level. We'll basically be asking for agencies to answer a series of questions. The whole process would take less than about 4 minutes to provide us with weekly data, and that data will then be rolled up into the reporting system that goes to the state and to the national reporting levels. Specifically, the FEMA regions, now the HHS regions, report out every week on these numbers. And right now, basically, we have no exposure. We being EMS has no exposure in that reporting process. So this is to fill that gap. I don't want anybody to think it's to replace anything that you're doing. It's certainly not that. And it's just a supplement to what we're doing as part of the COVID-related activities. We're doing a background paper on it, marketing information on it, and we'll be rolling that out to our NGOs, state EMS offices, and all the stakeholder organizations that we've been working with on COVID. So if you see it, hear more about it, if you have any questions, please let me know. Very much related to that is this PPE burn rate. I was pushed pretty hard to look at PPE burn rating or the burn rates and try to use that as a calculation for what we just talked about, and to report it out to show utilization and usage within services. However, in investigating that further with a couple of vendors, several vendors actually, and with some of the hot spots that are identified in the COVID pandemic, I have found out that that's not the best indicator at all, because it is not widely used by the EMS providers. In some cases, well, in almost all cases, it's not required reporting. So the individual provider is not reporting that they use gloves, gowns, or masks. And my fear is in moving that forward, if I did, someone would just say, well, look, you're not utilizing it, so we're not going to give it to you. Or the pushback, I mean, obviously they are using gloves and gowns, it's just not being documented. Or if we just reported raw numbers, we would be way under reporting what the actual need was. So I've strayed away from PPE burn rating reporting and discussions at this point. It doesn't mean we don't report it out. I know ESO has a great product that reports out. Chaney is a good product that reports that out. However, from what I've seen, and I'd be happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, it would not be the best report to move forward to try to make a case for PPE. I'll stop there on that particular topic and ask if there's any questions, comments, or concerns.
Eric, this is Ben at ImageTrend. I went and found the CDC's burn rate calculator that they have posted on their website. So that was pretty insightful for those of us who, don't come from kind of that hospital background, which I think is probably most of us in the industry. If you're pivoting away from burn rate, obviously we've talked about, working with our states to increase, validation and schematron to capture more use time over time. Is there another metric that you guys are looking to pivot towards for more insight on a national level for PP use, or is that still kind of being determined?
That's this product that we're talking about rolling out. This just basically a report done by the agencies. It's a voluntary report. It's following, again, method that the hospitals and nursing homes are using. The only difference is, like, the nursing homes have a little more clout because they can require that through some of their services. And working with the states, hopefully the states can make that part of the requirement. It's not the ideal situation, but it gives us the basic information that we need to report forward. We did not want to collect inventory rates. We did not want to know you had 10,000 masks on hand or that you needed them. What we really wanted to know is, did you have the PPE in place? How long do you have left based on your current call volume and projected call volume? And then if you're getting low or you're out, have you asked for supplies? And if you've asked for supplies, have you received some, any, or none? That's really what it comes down to. The other piece outside of PPE is exposure. Do you have providers? Do you have enough workforce now? And then if you have enough workforce, do you have enough workforce? If you don't have enough workforce, have you had exposures, and have you had deaths? And we clearly defined exposures the same way that the nursing homes and hospitals have, again, just to stay consistent in reporting. So not the ideal situation. We talked about using the EPCR systems and data from NEMSIS, but to be quite honest with you, it just doesn't fit with what we're being asked for.
And the new system, we're talking about that teletrack submission for HHS?
It's not teletrack, but it follows that guidance, yes. It
Okay.
follows along that system. And for those of you who don't know, there's only 2 ways now for hospitals and nursing homes to submit data to HHS. They call it HHS Protect is the master system. That's one way you can submit data. The other one is through this teletrack. So there's 2 avenues to get your data in. The real thing, and I wish I could show you the actual reports that this was going into, and then it would make more sense. But unfortunately, I'm not allowed to do that. These reports go to the HHS regions, formerly the FEMA regions, and are reported out on a daily and weekly basis. The numbers are updated weekly. There's discussion on a daily basis. Out of that, there's a spreadsheet. The top line in the spreadsheet under the Healthcare Resilience Task Force was hospitals and nursing homes, and it would show shortage of PPE. Specifically, we're low on gowns, masks, and this is for a specific region. So it might say in states X and Y. But then the next line is transportation, and that's EMS. And don't ask why transportation is not in healthcare with hospitals and nursing homes. Don't go there. We've fought this battle for years. At least for this event, it's in a separate line, which can be good. However, in that separate line, what I'm seeing under the same request for gloves, gowns, and masks above for a region, EMS is fine. And the reason it's showing fine is that that data is not getting to that regional report, which is what we're trying to address. And that's just where we are right now. I think this will suffice to address the very minimal amount of data they want. And then we can really start to push. The other thing it does is it gives Dr. Kramer, Kate, who are dealing on a daily basis and hourly basis with a lot of these different committees, the ability to say, we have this data from the state of Arkansas showing 21 agencies have requested PPE. Why are they not getting the PPE they need? And we do not have that granularity right now. So there'll be more to come on that. When you see it, if you have questions or concerns, please let me know. My big thing is I want to make clear is we are definitely not in the business of trying to put anybody out of business, nor are we trying to make duplicative processes, and nor will this replace the agency from requesting data, not requesting data, the agency from requesting supplies, PPE, or resources of any other kind for COVID-related response through their normal channels. They will still request through their normal channels. This is just giving them a voice from their agency directly to the state and directly to the Fed for us to follow up other thoughts on that before I go on to ILI? So ILI is sharing agreement. So our original agreement said that we would maintain the ILI dashboard that has been widely used across a lot of federal agencies and now a lot of states. It's interesting as states become hotspots or have big hotspots in them, you see the increase of the ILI dashboard use for that particular state. So we're going to see that. I'm hoping to get that out today or tomorrow. The request to extend that, we're going to request the ILI data sharing agreement with the states to go on through the end of this calendar year. So again, just an FYI. And then the last thing is our ask to you folks, to the vendors on the call. Have you been asked to develop any specific data exchange initiatives with hospitals or nursing homes or doctor's offices related to COVID? And this goes back to work I'm doing with the specific telehealth group and with CMMI and CMS.
I would say anecdotally at Image Trend, I mean, we are always having conversations about interoperability between EMS data systems and you know, normally hospital systems, Epic, Cerner, Meditech, et cetera. I would say that the demand has certainly increased in light of COVID, which we in many ways have found ironic because those systems don't come together quickly always. But we've certainly seen an increase in demand, yes.
Are the asks specific from the client, like the Image Trend client, to receive data back from the hospitals, or is it exchange? Is it simply just the exchange of data or follow up, knowing that a patient X was exposed, or not exposed? If patient X was positive, sorry.
So we've probably heard every iteration.
Okay.
We've had hospitals say, I mean, normally, especially prior to COVID, you know, when the conversations were happening, often the hospitals tend to initiate saying we need better compliance with, you know, documentation. I mean, it affects their accreditation through JCO, you know, the percentage of compliance of EMS records making it into their HIM systems. I think with COVID, we saw a real spike in the urgency and the percentage of you know, systems that were reaching out. That certainly increased. You know, I think a lot of those conversations have been framed around COVID, but I think there's also probably been an assumption that the need was going to far extend past COVID. There have been talks about folks saying, you know, well, I'd like to know, you know, which patient tested positive, but I think that becomes very complicated state to state. You know, I just know even as a clinician, you know, even, you know, with the Ryan White Act, it's very difficult for agencies specifically to interact with their hospitals they transport to, sometimes on exposure, you know, testing, source testing for, you know, hepatitis and HIV, et cetera, when there's, you know, blood or fluid exposure. So on the COVID front, I think it's been handled state to state. I know, you know, some feedback we got in New Jersey was the master list in New Jersey is being handled through state police, or at least disseminated down to state police, which to me was quite a unique situation that it would be handled through police versus, say, OEMS and others.
Okay. Perfect. That's all I have, Clay and Julianne.
I was going to mention, we also have a similar portal so they can, the hospital record system that goes from our system to the hospital can receive that diagnosis back from the hospital for COVID-19.
This is Dave Gallagher, Washington State for Airlift Northwest. We're probably a much smaller subset than what you're talking about, Eric, but we've actually, we're just completing a research study on cruise patients, COVID positive rates and such like that. And I forget the publication date, but it'll be out pretty soon. We coordinated with state and several agencies of where we transport to come up with this. So we're actually trying to see if transport rates or personnel on transport rates are, you know, contracting at a higher rate or anything like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
And I know the state of Oregon is getting a list of positive cases and then going back kind of backlinking that to past EMS calls to identify EMS calls that were potentially exposed to these patients, whether they knew it at the time or not, who ended up testing positive.
That's all I have, Julianne. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Eric. I didn't put it on the agenda. I see my oversight. Are there any comments, questions for open forum?
I did have one question. Do we have an update on the timeline for that? Forgive me, I'm going to forget the name of it. There was the Wolf page report that you guys had kind of commissioned and were working on. You presented it maybe the last meeting or the meeting before that.
Yes, we are just putting the finishing touches on that. It is in the final proof editing. So that the Page Wolf Bergenworth HIPAA document will be, that's coming really shortly. We're in the final stages for that. I think that'll be very valuable as well. I think there will be a lot of call for that.
Julianne, I know we had some very minor edits there towards and that was on Monday. We sent that back. Does that go back to them, and then once they make those edits, we're done? Is that done?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a couple of periods in the wrong place, one missing, some commas, very minor formatting and editing details, and then that's ready to go.
And then there will be
about it on our end. One of the things we run into frequently is just struggling with facilities. Many of them just don't even think about EMS on the data front, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had, when I was on the sales team with hospitals about, interoperability, these data connections. And when you get to the part where you say, outcome data, I've had countless hospitals say, why would I ever send outcome data? Or, they even understand the why, then you have to spend a lot of time talking about should they, could they, they just don't see that. So I think this document, we're really excited about it.
So Ben, real quick, there's actually going to be three. There's this document, there's an update to the 2012 document that they drafted, and then there is the 2-page-ish letter in legalese. The document you're going to see now is written more for the EMS services and as not an educational document, but it has a little bit more of an educational flavor to it. The next one that they're providing, the little 2-pager, is more geared towards the succinct lawyer-to-lawyer talk for the hospital and the CEO. Just an FYI.
No, that's great. We really appreciate all of them, and we'll have use case for all of them.
Thanks for bringing that up, Ben. Are there any other questions, comments? Lots of great discussion today. Thank you all. Our next meeting isn't until August 12th. You kind of get a little extra week in there where we meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. Thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate your time. We know you are tremendously busy, and we certainly appreciate your willingness to contribute to the conversation as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a terrific day and be safe. Thanks.